Welcome into Sideline to Sideline. I am Pete Mundo. As always, we're joined by Matthew Postins, Cameron Brock, and Derek Duke, Heartland College Sports.com. Your home for all Big 12 football, op-eds, articles, picks, podcasts, the whole thing. And, of course, we're brought to you by mybookie.ag. Be sure to check those guys out. We've been using them. The picks went 4-0 last week. Promo code is Heartland, 100% sign-up bonus. Be sure to check it out, mybookie.ag. Matthew, let's start with the team that you've seen this year, TCU, going on the road, beating Oklahoma State in Stillwater. I know the Cowboys were without their right side of the offensive line, but how surprised, if at all, were you by that win?
A little bit. I think that the thing that really shouldn't surprise us about a Gary Patterson team is that they were prepared. And they've been a good road team for a long time. I think that win made them 35-10 on the road since 2009, and I think they're 3-3 against top 10 teams on the road over the last 2 years. So, that's what you expect from a Gary Patterson team. The thing that surprised me was how good they were on the offensive side of the football. That's the area where TCU's really kind of struggled the last couple of weeks. When I saw them against Arkansas, it's not like they were a mess, but they were just inconsistent. You saw them finally get their ground game going. You saw them finally get the pass game going. And I think the nice thing for Kenny Hill as the quarterback is I think we expect a little bit too much of him because he has these huge starts to the season. Had one at A&M, had one at TCU. I really like the way they've got everything distributed around him from an offensive standpoint. It makes him a little bit more of a game manager. It makes him not have to press so much to try and make a play. They put a lot on his shoulders last year. Part of that being because they were without Cavante Turpin. With a full arsenal of weapons, I think that makes Kenny Hill a much better quarterback, and it could potentially make them a much better team down the road.
Now, Oklahoma State obviously is 0-1 in the Big 12, which is crazy when you think about this team. Could still win a Big 12 title, could still make a college football playoff. Our own Dave Beal, who's not joining us because he is on a tight leash from his girlfriend, it seems like week in, week out. He wrote that apparently Oklahoma State fans are ready to jump off a cliff. But, Derek, do you think the Cowboys at this point, as the team currently stands, can make a college football playoff?
They still got a shot. I understand that they lost to TCU, but it's just one conference game. Can they lose another one? Probably not. But this actually turns Bedlam into a must-win now for the Cowboys. There's no if, we hope we win. They have to win that game if they want to get to the Big 12 title game. They still have a shot as long as I think they probably have to go undefeated down the stretch and then still win the Big 12 title game. But they definitely still have a shot even with one loss.
Yeah, I just think it's going to be very difficult. And it's funny how now that all of a sudden we're talking about Bedlam, College Game Day is going to be there. And now it's like, well, the better game, at least as of right now, is the following week when TCU goes on the road to face the Oklahoma Sooners. September 26th, that's the biggest game in the Big 12 left on the schedule. There's no doubt about it from what we know. Let's go to one of the other games. Cameron, you were at Houston, Texas Tech. You saw this Red Raiders team put together a semblance of a defense. You feel good about it. Your article on it got a ton of traffic on the site, on Facebook. So are you really buying this Texas Tech defense and what David Gibbs is selling these guys?
Well, compared to years past, I am buying what he's selling, and I am buying this Texas Tech defense improving. That being said, they're still not championship caliber. I mean, they're just putting Tech into a situation where they can make a bowl. Cliff Kingsbury keeps his job, and maybe get a few more recruits. I mean, these are baby steps. These are stepping stones, and the Texas Tech defense, they were the worst team nationally in rush defense 1 year ago. So they had to make steps, and they did. Right now, they're in the top 100. By year's end, I could see them, best case scenario, being top 50. But they're still a long, long way away.
But, Cameron, I totally think that now that Kingsbury's 3-0 in non-conference, he's got a pretty good shot at a bowl game, and that totally saves his job. I mean, there's no doubt about it, right? If Kingsbury makes a bowl game, he's completely safe heading into 2018.
Every Texas Tech fan wants Cliff Kingsbury to succeed. I mean, he's the golden child. He was the first quarterback under Mike Leach. He was the last quarterback under Spike Dykes. He's been around that program for a long time. He's won a Super Bowl, not necessarily as a starter, but
let's not get carried away there, Cam. Take it easy.
but he has NFL experience, and he himself wants that university to be successful. He's been a part of that program so long. I don't see anybody who wants him to fail.
Yeah,
this is an A&M and someone.
Matthew, what do you make of Kingsbury? Is he safe if he gets to that 6-win mark, or if you're a Tech fan and Tech supporter, should there still be some concern? Would you want him out? What's your take on Kingsbury at this point?
Well, I think it makes him safer, certainly, if he can get them to a bowl game this year. He's on my hot coaches list at College Football America, but I think the heat's off of him a little bit. And having seen Texas Tech at the end of last year when they lost to Baylor, finishing up 5-7, and that defense was just putrid last year. I mean, it was awful. They look light years better than they did at the end of last year. Dakota Allen, as you pointed out, Cam, during that game, he makes a big difference for them defensively. But they've also got a semblance of a pass rush now that they really didn't have last year. So this doesn't make them a Big 12 contender, but it makes them competitive against Iowa State, Texas, Kansas, maybe even West Virginia or a couple of other schools. It definitely puts them in line to get to a bowl game. And I think that if they get to a bowl game, I think Kingsbury comes back in 2018.
Let's jump to these other two games, Oklahoma, Baylor, West Virginia, Kansas. Derek, when you look at that Oklahoma-Baylor game, was that Oklahoma playing down to Baylor's level, or did Baylor play up to Oklahoma's level?
I actually think the Bears played up to Oklahoma's level there for a little bit. Zach Smith was absolutely phenomenal in that game. Threw for over 400 yards and 4 touchdowns against that Sooner secondary that, to me, kind of played a little bit maybe over-aggressive at times. And they got burned deep a couple times with guys like Chris Platt and Denzel Mims. But Baylor overall, I thought their offense played really good. They turned it on. They finally found an identity on offense with new quarterback Zach Smith. The only problem I have with Baylor right now is just their run defense. Their run defense is just atrocious. Unless they really get that fixed, they're not going to win too many games in the Big 12 for that matter.
Yeah, and the final game, the first, well, I guess Tech was also a noon Eastern kickoff, but that West Virginia-Kansas game was ugly on many levels. I know West Virginia is working with its second unit on defense because of injuries and whatnot in that game. But you allow 300 rushing yards to a player from Kansas. It's no knock against Khalil Herbert. Guys, that's pretty embarrassing stuff right there. Somebody jump in.
That's because of the injuries. Texas Tech's defense, they've had recruits in the past. They've had talented players in the past, and they've always been putrid because of the injuries.
That statistical performance doesn't line up with the defense I saw against Virginia Tech a few weeks ago. The injuries are making a difference, but you gotta at least tip your hat to West Virginia's offense. They were able to bail them out of that game.
Let's jump ahead, guys. It's only 3 games in the Big 12 this week, but pretty interesting storylines in these games that maybe we didn't expect before the season. Let's start with the Thursday night game, Texas at Iowa State. Matt, you're going to be there. You're heading up to Ames on Thursday morning. I think Jack Trice is going to be an awesome stadium atmosphere tomorrow night. So give us your thoughts on what exactly we're going to get in this one and what the big storylines are, in your opinion.
Well, I think for Texas, I think they want to go on the road and prove they can win a game. I mean, to play as well as they did, to be as competitive as they were against USC a couple of weeks ago. Tom Herman today was still chafing at the notion that was a moral victory for his team. He's not really interested in that notion. So I think the next step for him, I think he feels for his program, is to win that type of game on the road. It will be a big environment because for Iowa State, beating a team like Texas would be a big deal, even if Texas is not the Texas it's been in the past. For Iowa State and Matt Campbell in his second year, they've got to start winning games like this. They've got to start, they pushed Baylor at home last year. They pushed a couple of other teams at home last year before they lost. They pushed Oklahoma State on the road last year before they lost, and I was at that game. They've got talent at that program. Campbell's doing a good job of recruiting, but like David Beatty at Kansas, they've got to start winning games like this. So if this is a close game, I'm going to be interested to see if Iowa State can close the deal. But I could just as easily see, with the talented advantage that Texas usually has, I could just as easily see this being a double-digit win for the Hornets.
Yeah, I could keep going back and forth on this. I'll have the pick against the spread tomorrow. But Derek, when you look at this Texas team, which you obviously follow really closely, how big is this game for Tom Herman in year one after starting 1-2?
Well, I think it's huge. I don't think you can really start. You can't start the season off with 3 losses in the first couple of games. It's an enormous game for Tom Herman. This is a must-win game for the Longhorns. They can't afford any more losses this year, any more head scratchers, especially to a team like Iowa State, who beat them 2 years ago up in Ames 24-0 under Coach Charlie Strong. But this is absolutely a must-win for Tom Herman if the Longhorns really want to push that 7 or 8 win mark this season.
Cam, I can see it on your face. You've had this smirk on your face as long as we've been talking about the Longhorns. I feel like you have to say something very important and mind-blowing right now.
Well, as far as the Longhorns concerned, I disagree with Derek 100% here, and the reason why is Tom Herman setting up his system. That team is loaded with talent. I covered them in recruiting for at least a year, really kind of more, and I know all these guys that they recruited. They have the talent. Tom Herman's just got to get his system in. Charlie Strong, he just didn't work there. That wasn't a good fit for him, but he brought in all that talent. And so to call it a must-win, I think they're going to be a spoiler in November. I think they'll win a couple of games late in the season that they probably shouldn't when you look at them this early in the year.
But, Cam, when you say that they have the talent but they have to put in the system, shouldn't 4- and 5-star guys be able to figure out this system of Tom Herman's, which I think we make sound much more complicated than it is? They've had spring ball, summer ball. They've had a month of the season now. What is the leash for 4- and 5-star guys to figure out Tom Herman's system?
Hitting your own guys is completely different from hitting guys on other teams. And, yeah, you're right. They've had lots of time to figure out the system, but it takes years. It's a process. You hear it from every coach. It's just not jump in and exploit everybody. You saw week 1 against Maryland and the improvement up to week 3 with USC. I don't think Iowa State is a must-win right now. I think when you get to October, that's when you start needing to see the results.
Okay, let's jump to before we get to the primetime game, let's talk Baylor, Kansas State. Matt, you look at this game, and Kansas State's got the loss to Vanderbilt. They had a bye week. That game was kind of sloppy by Kansas State standards. Yes, they got arguably screwed by the SEC replay officials. Nothing new there. Baylor's playing better. They got a couple of big injuries, though, coming down today. Wide receiver Chris Platt is done. That's their biggest loss there. So should Kansas State fans be worried about this game, or did this bye week after Vanderbilt lost come at a perfect time?
No, I think it came at the right time. And if I'm a Big 12 coach, I don't want to face a Snyder coached Kansas State team after a bye week. I mean, he's had 2 weeks to prepare now. Like you said, Baylor's banged up. It's a really fun environment at Kansas State in terms of just being a fan there in that stadium. But, you know, as with Gary Patterson at TCU, who they're on a bye this week and they play West Virginia the following week, I really don't want to play a Bill Snyder coach team after a bye week. I think they win that game pretty easily.
All right, the biggest game of the day, at least to me the most intriguing game in the Big 12 this week, is Oklahoma State at Texas Tech. Derek, you're going to be there. You're making that 6-hour hike from San Antonio. Night game in Lubbock. I actually talked to a radio guy in Lubbock today. He invited you to their pregame show at, Cam, you probably know it, Firehouse Subs across the way from the stadium. Does that sound right?
Yeah, that sounds right.
All right. Sounds like you got bad memories there or something, the way you said that. Yeah, it sounds right.
I was next door at Ruby Tequila's usually.
Okay, all right. Well, either way, Derek, you're invited. The problem is it starts early. It's 11 a.m. to 1 p.m. It's going to take you about 6 hours to get out there. It's a night game. It's going to be rocking in Lubbock. What are you most intrigued by in that game?
I really want to see how good Texas Tech really is. I know we got a little bit of a measuring stick against Houston, but Oklahoma State is for real, guys. They're easily, in my opinion, still a top 10 team. I really want to see how good that defense performs against that wide receiver group against Oklahoma State. Guys like James Washington, Jalen McCleskey, Marcel Aitman, Tyron Johnson, Dylan Stoner. Can they cover all these guys? Can they get a pass rush defensively? Can they stop Justice Hill in the run game? That's really what I want to see. I think offensively the Red Raiders are going to be fine. They have a plethora of receivers themselves like Cantrell, Willies, and obviously Kiki Kuti. I think they'll be fine offensively, but that Texas Tech defense is something I really kind of want to see up close in person.
Cam, are they stopping it? Is the Red Raiders stopping anybody this weekend?
Are you kidding me? Oklahoma State has one of the best offenses in the nation. Texas Tech usually can do pretty well against the pass, but that's the thing. Oklahoma State can run the ball too, and Texas Tech, this is going to be the best offense that they've faced all year by far. And after a big win, as someone who's followed Texas Tech football for well over a decade, the roller coaster is real. They get high up into the air, and then they sink below the ground. It's going to be bad this week for Texas Tech.
All right, well, let's run around. Let's do picks on all three games. We'll start just straight up, nothing against the spread, just straight up. Texas, Iowa State. Matthew, who you got?
I'm taking Iowa State. I'm going to take the home team.
All right, Cam?
Texas by a slim margin, and something weird is going to happen.
Derek?
I'm taking Texas.
I will as well. Slim margin like Cam. Baylor, Kansas State. I'll go with the I'm going to have the Wildcats winning this one. Matt?
K-State.
Cam?
Kansas State.
You wanted to go Baylor, I could tell. Derek?
Got to go with Kansas State on this one too, guys. I agree with you.
All right, and we'll go to Oklahoma State, Texas Tech. I think the Cowboys do pull it off, and this spread keeps bouncing around. It was 8, then it was 11, now it's 9. So I don't know what's going on. I think it's going to be a weird game as well, but I'm going to go with the Cowboys. Matthew?
I think it's going to be a lot of fun. I think you're going to see a lot of points on the board. But ultimately, I think Oklahoma State pulls it out. The problem isn't so much we saw a good defensive outing by Texas Tech against Houston. But Houston doesn't have the diversity of weapons that Oklahoma State does, nor is Kyle Allen anywhere in Mason Rudolph's league.
I'm totally with you. Cam?
Let me make this easy for Vegas. Oklahoma State by 25.
Oh, jeez. And Derek, you're going to be there. I hope Cam is wrong, because if not, that's a lot of driving for a 25-point blowout. Who you got?
Hey, football's football, man. But I like Oklahoma State, especially after the loss to TCU. I think they get the bounce-back win. If they didn't lose last week, I think this game would be a little bit closer. But I still like the Cowboys.
Good stuff. There you have it. Derek Duke, Cameron Brock, Matthew Postins, and Pete Mundo joining you sideline to sideline on HeartlandCollegeSports.com.